So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Yvan Petiteville from the European Space Agency, and I would like to welcome you all to this GEO 2021 Virtual Work Program Symposium. So today it's my pleasure to serve as your session moderator, along with David Green, who is the NASA Program Manager for Disaster Risk Reduction. You might remember that the third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction took place in Sendai in March 2015. And a year later, GEO established the disaster risk reduction as a top priority to build global capacity in response to increasing natural hazards. So the human and economic losses will continue to increase during this century, as experts predict that the population in megacities will double by 2050, and the number of extreme weather events might triple by the end of the century. So yesterday, for those who participated to the urban session, you might have heard the two representatives from the city of Thessaloniki in Greece and from the Resilient City Networks, telling us that city resilience, in particular, resilience to disaster, is at the top of their priorities. So this continuous increase of hydromet hazards requires really a change of a paradigm. And this forces stakeholders to invest more on prevention, more on mitigation, as acting only in the response phase is not economically sustainable in the long term, because as I said before, the human and economic losses will increase during the century. Several independent studies, including studies from the World Bank and the European Commission, have indicated that for every euro invested in disaster prevention, 4 to 7 euros are saved in disaster response. If you have difficulty with euro, you can use dollars. It's the same rule. So in this session, we will highlight the EU strategies, partnership and services for disaster risk reduction, supporting the World GEO program. So this session is broken up into two parts. The first part will highlight the disaster risk reduction frameworks and partnerships to advance Earth observation for decision making, and it will be led by Dave Borges. And the second part will highlight the partnership and the services to advance Earth observation for decision making, and this session will be led by Ivan Deloge. So you will see that GEO has a broad portfolio of disaster risk reduction activities. And as such, this session is set up with a short lightning talks to provide an opportunity for the community to understand some of the work underway. But this is just part of the story. Once all the presenters will have completed their presentations, then we will open the floor to questions and comments from the audience. And considering the time, we will not read the full bio of each presenter, but we will encourage you to go to the GEO webpage to learn more about each presenter. So first up is Dave Borges from NASA, who also serves as a co-chair for the GEO Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group. Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. And good day, everyone. In order to advance the use of Earth observations in disaster risk reduction, we must establish frameworks and partnerships to address user needs, close gaps, and build capability to accomplish our shared objectives. I'm happy to briefly introduce our presenters today, who will share information on frameworks, regional activities, and GEO collaborations to support our shared objectives here. Again, I do encourage you, while our presenters are sharing their presentations, to enter any questions you may have or comments into the Zoom chat function here. And as Yvonne previously said, during the audience engagement portion of our meeting today, our panelists will have the opportunity to respond to some of your questions and have some short dialogue. So without any further ado, I want to very briefly introduce our presenters here today. We're very grateful for the time that they've taken to invest in our session. First up, we have Andrew Spazoka, Program Management Officer at the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. Secondly, we have Paloma Meradillo, Vice President of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography, or INEGI, Mexico, as well as President, UN-GGIM-Americas. Next, we have Andisoa Melissa, Managing Director of Earth Observations at the South African National Space Agency, or SANSA. Next, Toshio Koki, Executive Director of the International Center for Water Hazard and Risk Management, ICHARM. And finally, we have Kine Anakwube, Consultant and Researcher with DEAR Africa, as well as my fellow co-chair of the GEO Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group. And without further ado, let's move into the presentations. Thank you very much.
So maybe Ivan Dodge could sing a song in order to to fill the gap. Ivan, floor is yours. Dave, is there any problem?
No, we should, the video should start here momentarily.
Okay.
And disaster risk reduction, all areas where Earth observations. Good evening.
My apologies, I forgot to come off mute.
Thanks, Rich.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. On behalf of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, I am very pleased to join the GEO Virtual Symposium and to help set the stage for today's parallel session number 3, which is focused on Earth observation strategies, partnerships, and services for disaster risk reduction. UNDRR is a custodian of the Sendai Framework, which was part of the synchronous adoption in 2015 of landmark UN agreements, which included the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and the new Urban Agenda, with the expected addition later this year of a global agreement on the post-2020 biodiversity framework. Taken together, these frameworks for people, planet, and prosperity make for a more complete resilience agenda, which spans inclusive and green development, reducing humanitarian need, and accelerating climate action and disaster risk reduction, all areas where Earth observations can and is making critical contributions. The Sendai Framework reinforces the shift from managing disasters to managing risks and outlines 7 clear targets to prevent new and reduce existing disaster risks. Specifically, it calls for substantive reductions to reduce disaster mortality, the number of people affected, economic losses, and damage and disruption to critical infrastructure and services. While at the same time, it calls for a substantial increase in the number of countries with national and local DRR strategies, improving access to early warning and DRR information, and raising our collective ambition for international cooperation. In the Anthropocene, where the scale of our material and energy throughput has put humanity's indelible imprint across many planetary systems, The EO and DRR communities carry a collective responsibility to deploy the best knowledge and risk science to help countries avoid tipping points and keep us within planetary boundaries. To this end, EO can help prioritize global and national action for risk prevention, reduction, and resilience. UN-DRR's engagement with the global risk community and UN member states has focused on raising the collective understanding of key risk concepts, such as hazards, exposure, and vulnerability. While this work continues, we need to act with renewed urgency on improving, particularly respecting cascading and systemic risks across planetary boundaries, including those impacting our health and well-being. EO, whether space-based or in situ, has the power to change and save lives. Earth observation is pivotal to Sendai implementation, as it can help shape thinking and priorities and inform long-term planning and investment to address the climate adaptation deficits that continue to increase, particularly as environmental, health, and other stresses become more frequent, accumulative, and impact new geographies. Let me end by highlighting 4 key areas of convergence where UN-DRR sees tremendous opportunity for the EO and DRR communities to work better together. First, despite technological advances in big data and processing power and the promise of machine learning, many countries still face challenges in making risk information accessible and usable to decision makers and communities. Here's where the DRR and EO communities can best deliver together: bridging data producers with users, EO specialists with DRR experts, including those national Sendai focal points, as well as bringing together NGOs and international bodies to work together to ensure that EO is used to improve disaster planning, risk reduction, with a particular focus on gaps in knowledge around vulnerability and exposure. By leveraging EO insights, we can also better link to local risk knowledge, including citizen scientists, to help sustain the political will for DRR by demonstrating its benefits and its trade-offs for action. Third, by helping countries improve risk surveillance, risk governance, and national capacities to strengthen national systems through joint EO and DRR partnerships with government, bridging both global and national research communities together with civil society and the private sector. And lastly, by keeping our focus on sustainability, we need to develop better and tailored business models for EO support for DRR at both global and national levels. These are but 4 opportunities that speak to the promise and potential of bridging the EO and DRR communities. And we look forward to exploring these and others during this virtual symposium. Thank you so much, and we look forward to our discussions together.
Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good night to each and every one of you. The relevance of collaboration, partnership, and coordination among member states, regional organizations, academia, industry, the private sector, and civil society was stated in the Regional Aguascalientes Declaration for Better Together, signed between CariGEO and UN-GGIM-Americas in 2020, that considered the 2030 Agenda for SDGs, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, among other global agendas, call for coordinated actions in new data acquisition and integration approaches, employing data and technology for sustainable development and disaster risk reduction. In 2018, the UN-GGIM Working Group on Geospatial Information and Services for Disasters was tasked to put together a survey on current practices and issues of the Americas. The survey findings were analyzed in a report titled Diagnosis and Gap Analysis. In a nutshell, the report was about highlighting issues in the region to use geospatial information to mitigate disasters and to be more resilient and responsive. Currently, the working group is working on a document for a regional capacity building action plan in response to the items identified in the 2019 report, in accordance with other UN foundational documents, including the Global Strategic Framework on Geospatial Information and Services for Disasters, and UNGA resolution about addressing knowledge gaps in disaster risk management. The working group has 5 task teams aligned to the 5 priorities for the actions of Strategic Framework on Global Information and Services for Disasters, for the articulation of Capacity Development Implementation Plan, The first one, government and politics, is led by Colombia. Awareness raising and capacity building led by Canada. Data management led by Argentina. Infrastructure and common services led by Panama. And resource mobilization led by Barbados. Finally, I want to comment about the regional working group on the measurement and recording of indicators related to disaster risk reduction, which was created in 2017 at the Statistical Conference of the Americas, and that was ratified to continue work by 2 more years to address the complexity of reporting on indicators of the global goals of the Sendai Framework and the SDG indicators. The general objective is to prepare a framework document that facilitates a systematic and periodic generation of data and statistical information on disaster risk, which would contribute to disaster risk management in Latin America and the Caribbean. In this context, the working group plays an important role in the integration and contribution to global efforts for measuring, recording, and reporting on indicators of the global goals of the Sendai Framework and the SDG indicators. These are examples of member states collaborating together in the Americas to produce relevant information that can support decision-making in favor of disaster risk reduction. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andy Somlisa, and I'm with the South African National Space Agency. Thank you, Rich and David, for the invitation and your patience. Africa holds half of the world's most risk-prone countries, and it's been experiencing a rising number of disasters. Droughts and floods, 2 of the most common natural hazards, cause significant displacement of populations, losses in agriculture and infrastructure. On an individual hazard basis, epidemics are the major cause of disasters, as we have seen with HIV/AIDS, the malaria, tuberculosis, and COVID-19 epidemics are severely impacting communities and households. All of these have negative impacts on the continent's ability to achieve sustainable development. The Program for Action for the Implementation of the African Regional Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction identifies key priorities and is aligned to the Sendai Framework. However, the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 report on the state of disaster risk reduction in Africa indicates slow progress and the need for more investments and efforts to reduce risk from disasters in the continent. Investments in Earth observation are one of the strategic moves countries can make to improve progress and save lives. Here we are looking at global, regional, and national partnerships. A number of countries in CariGEO are now able to improve their flood mapping products and monitoring of water extents towards combating drought. This is possible due to the Digital Earth Africa platform and partnership. From Ghana, Tanzania, Sudan, more countries are geared to find disaster risk reduction solutions in Earth observations. The International Disaster Charter and the local partnerships, such as the one between the South African National Space Agency and the Disaster Management Center, ensure a quick turnaround time in mapping floods to support local municipality emergency responses and recovery plans. CariGEO, Digital Earth Africa, and the national space agencies such as SANSA not only provide the technological tools, the data and products. Most importantly, they focus on engaging with users and developing capacity to mainstream the use of Earth observation. This news clip tells the story better.
Conservationists in Kenya have rescued 9 endangered giraffes from an island threatened by rising floodwaters. The Baringo giraffe, also known as the Rothschild giraffe, is close to extinction. Scientists have been using a database of satellite images going back several decades to plan the translocation of the giraffes to a new sanctuary. Emmanuel Igunza reports.
On Karikoni, the Baringo giraffe is being carefully ferried to a new home in a custom-made barge. Satellite. The team has been using satellite images to plan the move. The Digital Earth Africa platform contains data that until recently was only available to a handful of people. Now the team can see changes in water levels and vegetation cover in the region going back several decades. It's a new tool for conservationists responding to Africa's increasingly unpredictable weather.
Thank you very much.
I'm Toshio Koike. I will consider how to make maximum use of the Earth observation data and information in society. From science point of view, we need these online synthesis functions. By using these functions, the science community can promote knowledge integration beyond disciplines. This process is called as consilience. However, there is still a gap between the science community and society and the on-site stakeholder. To fill the gap, we need an external support function, that is facilitator, which is not just as a master of ceremony, but as catalytic beings. Based on new viewpoint from the science community and the communication function, facilitators can make maximum use of the Earth observation data and information to fill the gap. Then, user needs and local knowledge can be shared with the science community by facilitators. As a result, the science community can propose a new framework to society for getting fresh learning by the Earth observation data and information. Within Africa aimed to develop online synthesis function and implemented a capacity building program for fostering facilitators, focusing on flood early warning, hazard mapping, and the contingency planning in Niger River Basin and Volta River Basin in West Africa. Just after the launch of the project, COVID-19 spread worldwide and interrupted majority of the field works. Only through remote communication and cooperation under COVID-19, we developed a regional flood early warning system on the Earth. We also developed a two-tier e-learning program, training of expert TOE, followed by the training of trainers TOT to foster facilitators. Through the 4 weekly sessions of the TOE, 197 participants among the totally 288 passed the evaluation test. From the TOE winners, totally 44 were nominated as a TOT participant. Finally, 30 participants were awarded as facilitators through the 2 weekly sessions of the TOT. We got a great success in maximum use of the Earth observation data and information in society. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, welcome to GEO Virtual Symposium 2021. I'm making a presentation on the GEO DRR Working Group activities. My name is Kene Omokube, and I'm one of the DRR Working Group co-chairs. I'm making this presentation on behalf of all the co-chairs. The GEO DRR Working Group has the purpose to develop and implement the coherent and cross-cutting approach within GEO to advance the use of Earth observations in support of countries' DRR and resilience efforts, and to serve as primary GEO liaison to the UN-DRR. There are 3 subgroups, and subgroup 1 is fostering participation of stakeholders in GEO-DRR initiatives and promoting, including through good practice, the sharing of data and knowledge to improve the use of Earth observation in DRR. As part of its work in progress, the subgroup 1 is developing and is conducting a joint survey of DRR climate change capacity development activities across the GEO work program. It also is coordinating development of Earth observation risk toolkit. The subgroup 2 is focusing on the UN-DRR coordination for Sendai Framework priorities, but specifically it is increasing the use of Earth observation data by national Sendai Framework focal point authorities for global target E. As part of its work in progress, the subgroup is developing policy brief on how Earth observation can aid in creating disaster loss data for the use in DRR strategies. The third subgroup focuses on climate change and SDG coordination. Specifically, it is developing the DRR climate change and SDGs link, notably for adaptation, early warning, and resilience. As part of its work in progress, the subgroup has developed a policy brief using Earth observations for landslides and their impacts. It's also compiling current country-level information about efforts related to early warning of disasters using RIP and the Anticipation Hub via Germany and the Red Cross and EBO data. Thank you.
It's 5 o'clock.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Great. Thank you again to our speakers for enlightening us through those talks on the frameworks, constructs, and efforts to advance the use of Earth observations for disaster risk reduction. In an attempt to summarize some of the information we just learned from our speakers, I'd like to highlight a couple of key points that I took away from that. Firstly, the Earth observations and disaster risk reduction communities carry a collective responsibility to deploy the best knowledge and risk science available to solve these interconnected societal challenges. Our diverse community's alignment with the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction is helping us move forward from managing disasters to addressing how we can better manage risks and the associated integration of hazards, vulnerability, and exposure. And finally, only through these proactive efforts and continually cultivating these can we develop partnerships like the Aguas Calientes Declaration that was highlighted moments ago that ensure that the services and solutions we develop are actually beneficial, accessible, and usable by those who need these Earth observations derived insights the most. Thank you very much. And right now I'd like to introduce—
I'm very excited to be here on behalf of the—
Oh, got ahead of ourselves there. But right now I'd like to introduce Ivan Deloach, Executive Director of the FGDC and a GEO veteran, here to introduce part 2 of our session. Ivan.
Thank you, David, and good day, everyone. On behalf of many of our GEO colleagues, I want to thank you for joining us this morning or this afternoon, this evening, wherever you may be, for where I think is a very exciting session on disaster risk reduction. I think, as we all know, we're all impacted by disasters for our global communities. And as you heard from our prior speakers, having appropriate frameworks in place are critical for us to be able to mitigate and deal with some of these challenges. In this next session, we have an excellent set of speakers who will speak to partnerships. Again, in the Earth observation community, partnerships are critical for success. And you're going to hear, which I believe will be some great use cases from our speakers this morning. First, we have Nadine Alamed from OGC. We'll kick off the session this afternoon. And then Ryan Ahoa will also join us. And then we have a very compelling case from General Garcia from Peru, who we've been actively engaged in working with them with some of their satellite data. And then Ms. Simone Lloyd from Jamaica, who have heard, many of us have heard speak before, and she brings a very compelling case for the use of geospatial data and Earth observations in her country. And then finally, we'll conclude with Amir Gavati, who also bring a very compelling story to our panel this morning. So with that, without any further ado, we'll start our session with Dr. Alamed. Thank you.
Open Geospatial Consortium to tell you a little bit about how we are contributing to disaster risk reduction. So let me start by telling you just a little bit about OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium. We have about 500 plus members from all over the world. I hope you recognize some of the large government ones like FGDC, USGS, NOAA, NASA, ESA, NR Canada. I hope you recognize the private ones in this sample that you see here. From Maxar to AWS to Microsoft to Google to Esri to Hexagon. And if you go to our page, there are so many other universities and startups because this is the age of geospatial. So in short, this is already a huge global partnership, and we're trying to make data and information that has a geospatial aspect to it findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, fair. During disasters, information is hard to find, it's not easily accessible, the systems are not interoperable, and everything is sort of reusable with a lot of hard work. And honestly, if we are spending 80% of our time finding and procuring and preparing data, I think in 2021 we can do better. So we're trying to do better with this collective problem solving. So we have these series of, we call them initiatives, innovation initiatives. One of them is the disaster pilot that I'm going to tell you a little bit more about. But this is the idea of let's all put our heads together to see how we can respond and prepare for disasters, a little bit in a more coordinated fashion. And we produce and we use open standards, which OGC is known for, as well as we provide communities with best practices, proofs of concept. So we leave behind, whether it's open source code or deployable components on the cloud, so that communities can actually go from the experimentation or the proof of concept to scalable operations. That's the disaster pilot. We are literally kicking off Disaster Pilot 2021 this week with the leadership of, thank you, FGDC, USGS, NASA, NR Canada, AWS, Maxar, CNIDA, CariGEO, and this list is growing because there's huge momentum around, preparing for disasters using standards-based interoperable architectures in a partnership sort of way. So what we're doing very quickly in like half a minute is we're trying to find out and overcome the points of non-interoperability going from the data to decision-ready information. So in the mix, we are exploring and using established technologies and emerging technologies. So Earth observations, that's why we're working with Maxar. We're working with hybrid cloud computing. That's why we're working with AWS, Amazon Web Services. We're looking at delivery of the information to the responder, to the user, to the citizen via APIs or on a mobile device. So there's a lot of technology happening here. And I'm very happy that the context is being driven by our strong partnership with CariGEO and CNIDA in this case. So we have a flooding scenario and a landslide scenario in Peru. We're trying to get the same architecture applied in Canada. And in both cases, we are really trying to not to forget health, right? Because COVID is still around us. So what happens in a pandemic, in a disaster, all combined? And the idea is, can we stop reinventing the wheel? Can we figure out blueprints to get from data to decision-ready information during disasters at any stage of the disaster? Can we have a blueprint that anybody can actually use for capacity building to get started, so that we don't all scramble during the disasters and we literally reinvent the wheel? So please check out the website. We are kicking this project off today. Great leadership again from our sponsors. Thank you again to Rich Fraser, to Angelica, to Ivan Deloitte. I mean, the team is big, but we only have a few minutes. So I welcome your questions and I look forward to the discussion as well. Thank you.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Ahola. I'm an environmental scientist with Natural Resources Canada. And today I'm going to be speaking about the importance of partnerships for reducing the risks associated with flood disasters in Canada. So to provide a bit of context, so flooding in Canada has been occurring for thousands of years. You may be familiar with the examples of flooding in the Red River Valley as being shown in the animation here. as a very common and well-known flooding events in Canada. And the prevalence of flooding in Canada has led them to become the most costly type of natural disasters. So this certainly makes them of fairly significant concern to all Canadians and certainly Canada's different governments. Fortunately, we were able to have a number of different tools to help reduce the risks associated with flooding, with Earth observation information being one of the key components of this, particularly due to the large areas of Canada that can be flooded over time, and also the semi-predictable nature of flooding due to many of these events being caused by semi-annual snowmelt. But to effectively use EO data for flood monitoring, there are important partnerships that can certainly help with this. And what I'd like to do today is just to go through a quick example of one of these partnerships to show how it's beneficial. So this is an example of work that Natural Resources Canada has been doing in conjunction with the CEOS Disasters Working Group, which is really looking at exploring how different types of Earth observation data can be used to provide more continuous understanding and monitoring of flood events over time. So in the animations that are being shown, you can see higher resolution but lower frequency imagery from MEERS and Radar Sky Constellation mission, providing information for a portion of the Red River. So this provides fairly high detailed information, but there are certainly many temporal gaps that occur with this type of monitoring. So what we're looking at doing is leveraging geostationary satellite data, such as provided by GOES satellites, that provide near continuous monitoring, albeit at a coarse resolution. But by combining these two different types of data sets, you're able to have a much more consistent view of flooding events, which are certainly important given how quickly some of the conditions can change. So if you think about this, there are many roles and ways in which partnerships are important for achieving this type of work. Certainly by ensuring that the different forms of data can be interoperable, and that will be even more important as more information becomes available. And also looking at how we can use different forms of information together. So how can we exchange and test different methodologies? And also how can we look at collaborating towards improving different mapping tools, which are important in the context of flooding, such as methods for identifying open water, for example, and also areas of flooded vegetation, and also different forms of infrastructure, which are key for decision makers to understand. So this is a great current example, but really where do we go from here? So in the near term, what NRCan is looking to doing is, or will be doing, is participating in the Open Geospatial Consortium's disaster pilot. And what we're really hoping for the standards work on this activity to do is to really improve our use of analysis-ready data. And by analysis-ready data, I'm meaning two different contexts. So there's certainly the use of satellite imagery being made available to scientists for them to use immediately, and also decision-ready data for use by local actors who can make key decisions around disaster management in relation to floods. And we're also looking at we're also hopeful that this work can improve near real-time access to this information, and also improve our analysis dissemination visualization tools, all of which, of course, is in relation to making better decisions. Certainly, this activity we expect it to strengthen our existing international collaborations and really, hopefully, help us to develop new ones through common standards work. And I guess what I would invite you to do is reflect on my presentation, and also the subsequent presentations that we'll have today, is really thinking about what can we achieve together. So what other partnerships can we develop? Certainly considering this OGC disaster pilot activity, but also subsequent activities that we all might be able to participate in. So that's my talk for today. So I'd just like to thank you for attending and listening to me speak today. If you have any questions, please contact myself or my colleague Vincent Decker. Our contact information is here, and we'd be happy to collaborate with you. So thank you very much.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Peruvian Air Force Major General José Antonio García Morgan, CEO of the Spatial Agency of Peru, CONIDA. I would like to thank the organizers of the GEO Virtual Symposium 2021 for this event. Since in CariGEO, we believe the improvement we are doing in terms of collaboration and use of data for decision making is relevant to be shared with all the community. In this regard, this presentation will show the partnerships to advance the use of high-resolution data towards better decision for disaster risk reduction. Nowadays, users spend 20% of their time finding, cleaning, and reorganizing huge amounts of data, and only 20% of their time on actual data analysis that informs decision making. Global and regional framework, such as Sendai, UN-GGIM-GGIO, and others are helping to optimize workflow to transform data to decisions. By removing barriers in the supply chain, we can accelerate information to decision makers. So how can we optimize and accelerate synthesis and analysis to get information into the hands of decision makers? Well, we present some activities in relation to the answer to that question. In the first place, I would like to mention that thanks to strategic partnerships such as the International Charter, the community has a resource that improves access to imagery for disaster monitoring. As this slide shows, this partnership has supported 715 activations that have been used by many countries to leverage imagery for disaster response. This is a titanic effort to provide data for who more need it for decision making on the most critical situations. Great strides have been made. However, we need to make the process more efficient. As an example, this is a product over Peru. We suffered a series of severe flood during summer 2017, and we received satellite data showing the extension and the level of the affected areas in our country. We use also high-resolution satellite data from Peru-SAT-1 for this purpose. Moreover, I would like to mention that since 2016, when Peru-SAT-1 was launched, the Republic of Peru has supported requests from countries in the Inter-American community and Europe for disaster response. In addition, in the region, agreements have been established with Argentina, Bolivia, and Paraguay, looking for providing access to Peru-SAT-1 for broader objectives, and we are working with additional nations. The Republic of Peru, in partnership with member countries and partners of CariGEO and OGC, are sponsoring the 2021 OGC disaster pilots to improve discovery, access, and use of the GEO data for decision making. A major thrust of this effort will be to optimize high-resolution data, including Peru-SAT-1, using GEO services to expand use and make the imagery analysis ready and decision ready to accelerate decision making. It's important to highlight that this is one of the largest responses OGC has ever received in support of a pilot. The project comprises cloud-optimized imagery services that include analysis-ready data to conduct analysis, provide decision-ready information, products, and services based upon predefined indicators. The successful development, prototyping, and testing of these capabilities as part of the CariGEO and partner-sponsored OGC pilots is a welcome work program activity. In conjunction with this effort, the Republic of Peru is hosting a mapathon between June 28th and July 2nd. This is a monumental occasion, not only because we celebrate the bicentennial of independence of Peru, but also because we are conducting the first national mapathon where 0.7 meter data will serve as the foundation of the event, and with participants from the national and international community. The objective of the mapathon is collectively to map problems oriented to disaster risk management under different modalities, prioritizing interinstitutional collaboration of the local governments and universities at the national level, promoting research and development in the field of science and technology. Our objective is to advance the use of Peru's SAT-1 data by the community to support disaster risk reduction. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present, and I encourage your participation in the 2021 OGC pilot. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Amir Gibati, and I'm working with the Israeli Fire and Rescue Authority and the city of Tel Aviv from the Tel Aviv University as a consultant regarding flood forecasting and urban inundation. And today I want to present it shortly a decision support tool that we developed for those authorities in Israel for flood risk assessment. So it's actually an early warning system for flood and inundation. And the example, the case study would be the city of Tel Aviv. So this is the city of Tel Aviv. It's in the center part of Israel, on the shore of the Mediterranean. You can see on the left the Mediterranean. Just a few details regarding the city itself. So around 500,000 people are living in Tel Aviv, but around 4 million are in the surrounding metropolis area, this is the biggest metropolis area in Israel, the capital of the finance capital, and most of the people are working in this area. So you see here in the map, it's in the center of Tel Aviv, lying in the Mediterranean, and the city itself is suffering from flood and urban inundation, and it's a result that is meeting poor drainage developed urban area. And in addition, there are 2 rivers that cross the city, and in a situation that you have intense rainfall plus high water elevation in the river, then you get severe flooding. So this is the case in Tel Aviv, and we want to be ready for those events when we have intense direct precipitation in the city itself. And in addition, water coming from upstream from the basin, and I showed before those 2 rivers, we named Ayalon and Yarkon. So we actually started to use the GeoGlobe's ECMWF sprinkler system for those rivers. And we are providing the authorities that are responsible for decision making in respect of flooding result on the model. So we started to use it from last year, from the last rainy season in Israel. And during November and December of 2020, actually, we had a few flood events in those basins. You can see on the bottom, those flood events, around 4 peaks of flood. And on the left, you can see in blue, the Ayalon River that is crossing Tel Aviv. So we use the system, we use the stream flow forecast in addition to rainfall forecast that we have from the National Weather Service. A combination of those two of them actually allowed the authorities, again, the decision maker, like the people that run the drainage in the city of Tel Aviv, they got this data. By getting the data into insights, they could take action to be proactive and to be better prepared for those flood events. So I can say in confidence that tools like the GeoGloss ECWF stream flow system are very effective. They are saving property and life once you know how to use them in the right way. Just one technical slide to show how it goes. So there is a dashboard at the operational center at the city of Tel Aviv and also at the Fire and Rescue Authority. They are the first responder that need to take action. So on the left side, we can see precipitation and geological forecast. You see the rain intensity in blue. And on the right side, this is inundation map that we create for them. So the red spots represent extreme flooding areas that are going to suffer from extreme flooding. But this is not enough because it's only direct rainfall. It's coming from very high resolution numerical weather prediction, the WRF model. We use the GEO system in order to embed a combination of and stream flow forecast is the solution for the city itself. So you can see in black, this is the area where the flow is going to be generated, and you can see the hydrograph, the expected hydrograph, thanks to the GEO system. On the bottom slide, you can see the assessment that we are doing, the effect of the flood in the low area in the city. So we identify in advance, like around 10 locations that are the most sensitive to flooding. And once we have the hydrological forecast plus the hydrological forecast coming from the GEO system, then there is a solution. We can be prepared. What does it mean? What action we are taking? We are bringing more crew to the field. The fire people are ready for evacuation. They can close streets. They can bring pumps in advance. So then their action are much more effective. So to summarize, what we saw in this short speech is an example for the city of Tel Aviv, Mediterranean area that suffered from flash flood, how information system like the GEO can help authorities to be better prepared to take proactive action. Once you have the data and you know how to take insight out of that, because the data itself is not enough. So you need to understand the severity of the flood, the return period, how rare it's going to be, together with other information like direct rainfall, you can be better ready, and then you can have better preparedness for the citizens. So we're really thankful for the system. We would love to keep cooperate and be part of this amazing system. And thanks everyone that created this GEO system. So this is it from Tel Aviv.
Expanding data democracy for disaster resilience, UN-GGIM Working Group Disasters, and UN-GGIM-Americas CariGEO project. So data democracy is based on the open model concept of really making data available to whoever need it, whether they're technical or non-technical. And of course, within this context, it's with respect to providing data to facilitate response to various hazards. And of course, with various hazards, there are various levels and types of geospatial information that really would be applicable. So expanding data democracy really would be unlocking great value for all organizations and countries within the DRM and the DRR field. The UN-GGIM Working Group Disasters has the vision of ensuring that accurate, timely, and also reliable geospatial information and services are available in a coordinated way to decision makers, but also to operational leads. And with this, we are really here to ensure that there is a dialogue facilitated between the various member states, but also the UN system players and DRR organizations, that the data that is needed, it is high quality and available and accessible, is made available, different from ensuring that there's greater collaboration and coordination among the various entities and bodies within the disaster risk reduction field. So the strategic framework on geospatial information and services is a major accomplishment of the working group disasters, hinged on the 5 priorities for action, looking at governance and awareness raising, capacity building, data management, common infrastructures, and all the resources that ensure that we're able to provide geospatial information and services, but with so doing, also providing reliable statistic information that enable us to be better able to understand, but also formulate policies and manage risks associated with the impacts of disasters. So with this, we can look at the Caribbean region, which is impacted by various hazards. As we can see here, medium to very high in terms of level of risk. Hurricanes, storms, depressions, straws, earthquakes, volcanoes, landslides, floods, forest fires, wildfires, droughts, in addition to many others, including the current COVID-19 pandemic. So the Caribbean Geospatial Development Initiative helps to promote the whole improvement of spatial data infrastructures throughout the region, supporting, facilitating a community of spatial data producers who generate and maintain data to support initiatives throughout the region, whether there be national mapping entities or whether there be statistical bodies. The Caribbean GeoPortal is one of the major initiatives of this body, provided by ESRI and maintained by ESRI for the initiative. So this open mapping platform facilitates data sharing. Data is provided by ESRI, but also major disaster players such as NOAA and NASA. Analytical tools are also provided. Field data collection exercises, given the tools that are available. There are configurable apps that are available also, but also training opportunities. A webinar series has been planned and is being initiated that is also promoting this portal, and in particular with respect to disaster management. Webinar 2, which occurs in a few hours from now, leveraging the Caribbean GeoPortal for disaster planning and management, is core among our initiatives to promote the utilization of this platform. And so UN-GGIM Working Group Disasters and the CariGEO initiative is prime with respect to promoting the availability of geospatial information, but also various services and tools to support disaster risk reduction initiatives throughout the region, but also globally. I thank you.
In summary, I want to thank you all, the speakers again, for the excellent presentations. And it's really encouraging to see the community working together to address gaps and user needs through collaborative projects, capacity development, and also bridging the divide in addressing democracy data and technology. I'd like to take an opportunity just to highlight some key points that I observed. First and foremost, development of public-private partnerships are critical for the community and also provides opportunities to share information and data across our various platforms. The use of pilot projects to address analysis-ready data and decision-making was another highlight that I observed. And then also, lastly, the establishment of community platforms to build and to promote capacity development are critical. I would like to now introduce Dr. David Green, who will moderate our the audience engagement session of our activity this morning. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Ivan, and thank you to everyone here for a lively discussion, some very pointed and relevant questions that are going on in the chat. We only have a few more minutes, but I think we do have time for some dialogue and some discussion of questions. We have had the framework discussion that's gone from global to regional and touched on local. We've talked about analysis ready to decision ready. There's an ongoing chat about really reaching that last mile that we've promised to do with our Earth observations to really have impact to reach the community level. But we've also talked about some pilots and demonstrations as we've gone from the frameworks to the services. There were a few geographies that were not covered here and a couple of initiatives that I'm sure other people would be interested in joining. Could I ask, I'm just going to pull from kind of the collection of questions here. This question of what are the opportunities going forward for others that as we have new initiatives or these new technologies or capabilities, what are some of the best recommendations here of working with this community? Could I ask, I know Nadine has, we have the OGC pilots. General Garcia talked about the opportunity and investment and support from a new satellite capability. And I think Amir also has a touch point and some others on kind of that private sector and academic role. So could people talk about, some ideas here going forward from this workshop? Opportunities for people who have not yet joined in these initiatives or to move forward. Nadine, you want to start with that?
Yes, thank you, David, and thank you, everybody. As I was listening to these very quick presentations, I think there's plenty of opportunity. One thing we're doing with disaster pilot, for instance, and we kicked it off yesterday with, as General Garcia mentioned, the highest number of participant organizations, and David, you were there as well, so appreciate your support, and so was Ryan and his team. We can always offer opportunities, we call them, to observe how the pilot is going, so that you're observing essentially how we're building and testing and validating those recipes. It sounds easier said than done. But also there's the opportunity of taking these recipes and applying them to your context. So I was seeing the chat, whether it's CariGEO or the Asia Pacific. So either applying those recipes and seeing what changes depending on the local environment, or working together and follow-on activities on recipes for other types of disasters. So if we're doing flooding and landslide today, if we can do the earthquakes and the droughts for Africa, for example. So I think there's plenty of opportunity, and the issue here is let's connect. So this is a great platform for us to hear what others are doing so that we can connect and share this information so that we don't reinvent this wheel over and over.
Could I invite one or two others from the group here to talk about, again, going forward from this discussion today, a couple of key opportunities they want to make sure are lasting points that people can take away. I know,
Dave, this is Ivan.
Yeah, Ivan.
Yeah. From the various presentation and the messages in the chat, I'm wondering how I can see still that the activities that are presented are very often constrained geographically, and everybody recognizes that in terms of capacity building, the experiences gained, for instance, in CariGEO, which is quite effective in disaster management, might be beneficial also to other regional geos like CariGEO or AOGEO. We see that also, and sometimes I think it's AOGEO has got some links with GeoGlows. I'm wondering how we could improve this exchange of experience and improve the capacity building, transfer capacity building geographically between these regional GEOs and also between the regional GEOs and the rest of the GEO work program. I don't know if some people that are involved, like Angelica for CariGEO, or Nadine, or Andiswa in her previous life, she was also responsible for AfriGEO. They've got some ideas how we could improve this cross-fertilization. Thank you.
This is Angelica Gutierrez, co-chair of CariGEO. I really believe that one of the most important pieces is actually to strengthening the national GEOs. Not only, as Nadine says, this is the OGC pilots are sort of an exploring way for us to see what works and what, it's like we are building a recipe. So this year it's a big exploration time for us in CariGEO. And hopefully, this is going to be, we are going to be able to replicate in other regions. But I really believe that the bottom line is we need to strengthen the national GEOs and make sure that the national organizations are actually with the capabilities, not only infrastructure, but also workforce that is needed in order to absorb all these approaches of, like the Sendai Framework, etc. Perhaps General Garcia has other comments, but I think that this is very important.
Thank you, Angelica. Well, in Peru, for example, our commitment is to develop our capabilities and capacities in CONIDA to serve not only our community, but our region. The OGC pilots are a great opportunity to explore how to increase these capacities.
I'm wondering if some of our representatives from Africa or Asia, there were some questions about how do we extend the uniqueness as we go, as Angelica said, from country to country, to region, to then to nations within a different culture, a different context. Kene or Andiswa, perspectives on this idea of extending to other geographies and other communities. Any comments?
I can just jump in.
Sure.
Well, I think this is one of the values of the regional GEOs. So the opportunity to take on initiatives that are bubbling up very well in one region and implement and find a way of adapting and implementing them in another region is ideal. So AfriGEO will definitely be open in that in having that conversation. We are working on the premise that at the end of the day, we want DRR to impact at the national level. So and that's what we're stressing our partnerships on, to have the national partners that are mandated to respond at when these events occur, and they can actually push the policies and the practices that needs to be put in place, which then leads to the investment. So we would be happy to engage in terms of how we could embed this within AfriGEO. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to just open it up for Ivan, perhaps to follow up with this question on the cascading disasters and how that relates to services.
It's an excellent question, and one that we've been exploring and will continue to explore with the OGC pilots here in the United States as we deal with climate resiliency and planning. This is going to be critical and how these things are related. As we think about the huge landscape, of data and information. I mean, how do we connect this information in a way that is useful to the decision maker? So it is an approach that I think that we're still exploring, but I think it's one that's going to be critical as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. So I understand we only have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
So
my hands up. I have my hands up.
Whoops, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just in addition to the valuable contributions of those who have responded to that, my thinking is that at the local levels, there's a robust stakeholdership, that we have to leverage on. It is to trigger processes that will help to remind, because I know that probably independently or individually, some of these institutions or organizations or professionals do take advantage of EOs and GEOs facilities. But then we need to be able to do some linkages at the local level to bring these stakeholders together to be able to have a formidable structure at local levels that will be able to push on knowledge and information of taking advantage of EOS tools, EOS processes that could be useful for policy or other users or researchers, users at local level. So those are just my thoughts. It is to know how we can, trigger that process to begin at the local level. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing us down to the local level, where we talk about people understanding the choices they have, supporting the decisions they must make, and then following up with the observations and analysis to guide them as disasters unfold. So if I can take a minute, I think we have 1 minute left here to pick up on a few things we heard today. It's been a number of years since Sendai. We have ongoing efforts to the sustainable goals and new urban agendas and others. I think what we've reaffirmed that there have been significant changes over the last few years. What we heard today was an emphasis on really getting to disasters, right? Recognizing that observing the hazard is not enough, but combining it with statistical information, the social, the economic, that disasters are really about vulnerability and exposure of people and infrastructure. That progress is very timely now, is a refocus on the relationship between disasters and climate, the ability to analyze and forecast and predict to guide the adaptation that needs to take place. There was also recognition here of the different types of Earth observation, high resolution data, as well as radar data and others arriving at the right scale, both in time and in space. Important for that data to arrive, be analyzed, and be in the hands of people who are in a position to take action. So I think we've seen great progress over the last few years. I think GEO, CEOS, regional partners, regional collaborations, public and private. We have made considerable progress. I think this community still has opportunities, as we also identified today, to pilot more together, to show the convergence of different types of data. It's still a challenge, but commitments to interoperability, the idea of more usable, open science for application, and the different communities, whether they're interested in the impacts on the livelihoods of agriculture or energy or sectors. We're seeing a great collaboration and partnerships in the science. The frameworks are being used, the services are starting to be delivered. But I invite everyone, as they heard opportunities today, to follow up from here, to join in the working activities, in the pilots, and other efforts. And with that, I'll conclude my comments and this session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your participation in this session today. And I also just note the comment from Steve Ramich that Rui is working on an engagement plan. If you have any other ideas or thoughts, I am sure Rui would be happy to hear from you. That concludes this
thank you.
session.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Evan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.